Do you have to write lesson plans in your science class? Well, lesson planning of science does not have to be overwhelming. Today's video, I will go over some ideas with you, and we're going to compare the two main types of lesson plan formats, 5E and Madeline Hunter, and I'll show you some ways that it relates to the brain and learning so you can make it the most engaging for your students and where they actually learn. And at the very end, I will go over just one example to show you how simple it can be to plan a 5E unit. Well, if we haven't met yet, I am Fleur, the face behind Aloha Monday Teaching, where I help middle school science teachers like myself be more intentional, prepared, and refreshed for Monday and any day, hence Aloha Monday Teaching, just to look forward to our jobs again, which it's good. I do already. So anyway, today's video is based on this blog post, How Do I Make Lesson Planning of Science Simple and Focused? So this would be great for teachers, whether or not you have to write lesson plans for your principal or for observations and things like that. This is very important so that you are prepared and intentional and not winging it, because that can be super stressful. So here, the importance of lesson planning in science. When you have quality lesson plans or units, then students are engaged. And when they're engaged, their brains are growing, which means that they are learning. And that is truly why we are here as teachers, for our students to grow their brains and learn. So let's go ahead. We're going to compare these two, the most popular lesson plan formats, Madeline Hunter, which we learned about back in college, and the 5E lesson plan, which lends itself more to science and other subject areas as well. So I know our district, they're going to evaluate us based on Madeline Hunter. And if that's the same with your district and you're wondering, well, how can I incorporate a 5E lesson if they're assessing me or evaluating me on Madeline Hunter? This is to show you how they're connected. And that way you know that you are still covering everything, whether or not you're using a formal written Madeline Hunter or if you're using a 5E lesson plan. So these are all the steps in each of the lesson plans, and let's begin with it. So first thing, let's talk about the hook. So this is what you're using to gain your students' attention, to get them excited about what they are going to learn. These can be something simple like a quick activity. It could be a picture, a video, something that gets them questioning. It could also be a review of learning from the previous day, so because that's something important to do each time as well. So Madeline Hunter, this would be the anticipatory set and setting your objective and your purpose. And in a 5E lesson, it's the engage step. And what's happening in the brain when you use a hook is that you are activating the RAS, the reticular activating system, which is located back in the brainstem. And it gets your students' attentions. So that I will go over more when we talk about lesson plan hooks. Direct instruction. So this is when you're teaching, whether you are teaching in whole group, teaching in a small group, individualized instruction. This would be the direct instruction piece. So in Madeline Hunter, this would be the instructional input part or modeling. And in 5E, this is explain, which is that third step in the 5E lesson. And what's happening in the brain, this is a good opportunity to build those neural connections while you're teaching, giving examples and connecting to what they already know to strengthen those neural links in their brains and hopefully getting it into long-term memory. Because at this point, when you're just introducing information, it's being held in their working memory, possibly short-term memory, but in order to get it into long-term, you want to continue linking the information. And that's where student practice comes in. So student practice can be individual practice. This could be the guided practice part of Madeline Hunter, where you're watching them and you're guiding them through each step and they're doing it on their own and checking with them. Independent practice can be individual assignments. It could be group work, partner work, just where the students are practicing the content. And in 5E, this could be during the explore stage or elaborate, where they are practicing concepts. And this is really the part where students will build and strengthen those neural connections. After they have been taught what you teach them, they can continue making those links in their brains even more. One of the important things is that students need to practice what they learn and review it within the 24 hours of being taught it. And that will help them move it from working memory to short-term memory, or even short-term memory, and then making those links into long-term. Assessment. So for the assessment, now when you're lesson planning, you're basing it on your standards, okay? And it is a very, very good idea to have your assessment prepared before you even start doing the rest of your lesson plans. And that way you know that all the activities and labs and information that you're giving is something that you're actually going to assess. So for the assessment in Madeline Hunter, that is the check for understanding piece, which is happening throughout your lesson. You're checking if they're understanding it. So you're giving these formative assessments throughout the whole unit. You could check during independent practice, and then it goes back to the objective and purpose. Did they learn what you set out for them to learn? In 5E, this would be the evaluate step. So an assessment could be anything from a test or a quiz. It could be an essay, a report. It could be a project. But they are just showing that they have a deeper understanding of the topic, and it helps them retrieve that information from their memory. Then you know if they actually remember it or if it's in maybe long-term memory. So when I lesson plan, I plan with my teammate, and one of the first things that I like to do is brainstorm. And I write down, I know my standards, like I write down what standards we're going to cover. We have a great resource that we get to use, and it has a ton of things that we have to pick and choose from. And with my teammate, after brainstorming all the things we could do, we go over the standard, what we're assessing, like what we want them to learn, and then we'll narrow it down. How are we going to give them this information? And we just jot them down in our calendar. So I like to use, I developed Grow, which I have in another video. I'll link everything below. And I use this to help me when I'm planning, because it helps me be intentional, and I focus on what students' brains are doing when they're learning. That way I know that they're actually going to learn the material that I teach them and give them to practice. All right, so let's go ahead and make a 5E lesson all about the structure and function of cells. So this is an animal cell. So we are going to go through each. I'll give you examples of engage, explore, explain, elaborate, and evaluate. So for engage, when you're starting your unit, one idea is that you can show images of animal and plant cells. They make these really cool cameras that you can put on your microscope, and you can project it on your screen. You can take pictures. I've done this with, I got one last year, and I took a picture of the stomata on leaves, which was really cool. So you can do something like that, or just find pictures if you don't have that little camera. And then just get them engaged, like showing them, like asking them questions, or actually having them come up with the questions would be much better. Then for explore, and that you would just jump right into, you could do, put out some microscopes with different slides and have them observe different cells and what they observe about them to start exploring maybe they'll see some differences and similarities between cells. Or you could do a lab, like I have, there was a cell model lab, and it demonstrates the cell membrane. So you could do something like that. Then on another day, you would explain. So here's where you actually teach about the cells and organelles. You'll use your resources, PowerPoints, however you decide to teach it. That could take 1 or 2 days. And then they go into elaborate. And these are going to be some activities that they do to practice their new learning. You could do stations, you can do worksheets if you want to. You can incorporate those, throughout. You can do projects, those kinds of things. And finally, evaluate. At the very end, you have your test ready because you did that at the beginning. So you knew what you were going to teach. And you're going to assess your students and make sure they learned what you wanted them to learn. Or you can use a project as an assessment. All right, so we covered a lot. We compared Madeline Hunter and 5E, the 5E lesson plan formats to see how they are actually, really, really similar. So regardless of which one you're required to use, you're able to use either one and all your, get your students engaged and have your objectives met. So how do you plan your science units and lessons? Like, what is your process? I shared mine. Mine's brainstorming, and then with my teammate, we plan it out on a calendar. And what are some new ideas that you have for your students after watching this video? So I would love to know if you just write it in the comments and share with me. And then check out these other videos that you might enjoy.